Is this thing on?
Are you ready, Matt?
You're listening to Box Office Bingers
with Matt Diaz and Ernesto Santos.
Good evening, folks. We have a wonderful evening's entertainment lined up for you.
We know each other. He's a friend from work.
Box Office Bingers.
And the only way that I know how to do it is to find you a bloody good dump.
He's my friend. I don't have friends. I got family.
I can do this all day.
You know, if you put your mind to it, you can accomplish anything.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Box Office Bingers. Ernesto, this one has been a long time coming. I would say, I would argue to say even 3 years in the making, almost coming. Probably not in the making, but it's been a long time since we have this special guest on our show.
Absolutely. We are reviewing Joker Folie Deux with Matt Lupoli, sir. Welcome back. Last time you were on was 3 years ago for House of Gucci. I'm excited to have you back on. You're almost like you're our Lady Gaga expert.
I was thinking the same thing, you guys, and it's great to be with you. Thanks for having me. And yeah, I'm just glad that Lady Gaga works because I get to work.
Yeah, that I get to work.
It was funny because a couple of months ago, we kind of reunited after. I don't even know how long it's been before I even saw you in person before that. Easily a couple of years, right?
Was it at a going away party? Those are usually what brings us together.
Man, it was like a reunion of sorts because
Yeah,
it was a reunion. Yeah, and we met at the restaurant. I didn't even know you were going to be there. Like I
didn't know you were going to be there.
Yeah, I was like, oh yeah, you're here. And then we reconnected a little bit. It's like, it's been a long time since you've been on the podcast. It's like we should make something happen. And you're like, yeah. And I was like, what are you interested in? And to my surprise, you said, you know what? It'll be fun if we come back on for Joker. And I was like, huh. And
was it my idea?
Yes, it was your idea. It was your idea.
Because I'm such a little monster. That's the thing,
You're like, yeah, I should come back on for Joker. And because last time I was on, we reviewed House of Gucci and Lady Gaga was there.
That's right.
And then her next movie is Joker, so I can be like your Lady Gaga correspondent. And I said,
I love it.
I was like, yeah, that makes sense, right?
That could be my rocker, Matt.
Right under his name tag. That's right.
Also, for those who don't know, I just learned what a rocker was, and a rocker is not like only meant for a chair. You can actually, it's like an additional name on your name tag of almost like your name and then your position of some sort of leadership. Who knew? You learn something new every day. But yeah, so yeah, this was your idea, 100%. Because I didn't I was actually quite surprised. You're like, you know what? Well, I want to review Joker. I did not figured you would that's the movie you gravitated for. But I guess you follow where Lady Gaga goes.
Exactly.
I get
that. That's the thing, because you guys know I'm not an aficionado on any kind of comic book movies, unfortunately. But then again, I come at this with fresh eyes. So.
Yeah, very true. And what a movie to come on board with. This movie has been coming in with a lot of controversy, to say the least. Not only in the nerd world with all the comic book fans, but also the Hollywood and the cinema and the world, because the first Joker movie was an Oscar-winning film, won 2 Academy Awards that year, one for Joaquin Phoenix performance as the Joker, as well as it won for Best Original Score. It made almost $1 billion, and so yeah, it makes kind of all the sense in the world that they would want to make a sequel to this. But as we would talk later on in the show, we would a lot of stuff was happening behind the scenes that kind of contributed to potentially its financial downfall, and it's all, and as well as its critical shortcomings as well, and as well as its financially. This movie has probably riddled, riddled with Hollywood, what's the word? Buzz, I should say, because this was being looked at for Oscar contention, and now it's not even close, which is crazy to think about. So Yeah, a lot to dive into. Ernesto, who's involved with this movie?
So, starring Joaquin Phoenix, of course, the magnificent Lady Gaga, Brendan Gleeson, and Catherine Keener. Written and directed by Todd Phillips, who did the Hangover trilogy, War Dogs, Due Date, Road Trip, Old School, Starsky and Hutch. Also written by Scott Silver, who wrote the original Joker. He wrote 8 Mile, The Fighter, and The Finest Hours. So both men have a lot of great movies underneath their belt, including the original Joker. There's a lot to talk about when we talk about this movie. There's a lot.
Yes, to say the least. But before we get into that, Matt, how have you been? It's been almost 3 years since we've had you on the show. How have you been, sir?
I can't believe that it's been almost 3 years. That's crazy, because that means it's been 3 years since the three of us worked together, and it definitely doesn't seem like that long.
That's so true.
So despite that, not working with you guys, it's been good.
Yeah. And you've got a new job. How's that going for you?
Yeah, it's been great. I kind of did a career pivot because I used to be a journalist, and now I'm on the other side of media relations. I work in the cruise industry as a spokesperson for a cruise line, and it's been so much fun. It's been a complete 180 from my old life, and it's been just lots of fun challenges, and I've loved every second of the last 3 years.
So question for you. So what is it now that you love the most about your job?
Definitely the people. Working with the people that I do has been so interesting, and that was honestly my favorite thing about my old job too. Not just the people I worked with, but the people that I got to meet every day, because as a journalist, you meet new people every day. But working for a big company like I do now, and kind of moving about the company as I get to do in my role with public relations, it's really cool to see the different personalities that take on all the different jobs within a cruise line, because a cruise line is a little bit of everything. I mean, you're a hotel, and you're a restaurant, and you're Broadway entertainment. I mean, you're a little bit of everything, and all those people work, under the same roof, so to speak. So that to me has been just endlessly interesting, to get to meet all these different personalities who all come together to kind of put on this really, really incredible and unique experience every day. So it's been great.
So it's interesting because you went to reporting to the news, but now you're somewhere where you're almost creating the news. So what is that difference like now that you're on the other side, kind of creating the news for the reporters to report on?
It's, I would say that that part of it actually is not that different, right? Because a story is a story is a story. So when we have news to announce, it's very similar to the way that I used to report, because we're just kind of putting the facts out there. So that part really hasn't been so different, because at the end of the day, it's always about the people.
Sure. Whether you're talking about the people that I work with and how things affect them, or the guests who sail with us, stuff like that. It's always goes back to the people. So it's not that different. Okay. Good.
How difficult was it to kind of accept the pivot, I guess? Because I know, because the reason why I asked, because I know, a lot of people, you go through, say, I'm trying to get a baseline here. You go to college, you go to school for one thing, you want to do it, and then you're doing it. And all of a sudden you're like, you know what? This just isn't me anymore. And now all the stuff you've been working toward is now, I wouldn't say it's gone, down the tube, but it's just you're. But it did. But
he's an honest man.
But that's a lot of hard work to get where you are, to then now have the realization, I don't necessarily want to do this aspect of it anymore, and coming to the realization that I now need to pivot, and then coming up with something that maybe you weren't really striving for, but kind of maybe all of a sudden oh, maybe I can do this and maybe I can do that. How was that, process for you? Because I know a lot of people kind of sometimes go through that, where especially during the pandemic too, a lot of people were having career changes, like especially when they were forced to stay home and work. They realized that maybe this is not the thing they wanted to do anymore. This is a chance to reset everything. So how was kind of like that for you? And then also transitioning into your new role, not doing the thing that you were kind of wanting to do since, going to college and for everything.
Yeah, I always joke with people that I let a 14-year-old decide what I wanted to do for the rest of my life, because that's about the time when I started to really want to be a journalist and working toward it.
Yeah.
But then again, I think that my sort of career path has always was kind of a little bit weird, right? Like in college, I didn't study journalism, even though I knew I wanted to be a journalist. I purposely was an English major, which is journalism adjacent, right?
Sure. You got it right.
But you got it right.
Yeah.
So, but I wanted something a little bit different there, and I was already working at a local news station at the time, doing like digital producing and whatnot when the internet was a lot newer, which makes me sound ancient. But that's what it was, and that was that was a lot of fun, like a really interesting time to be doing that, because we were just trying new things out, and seeing what stuck, so to speak. And then I kind of just, I don't want to say fell into being a TV reporter, but
sure.
At that time, the digital world was new. There weren't really a lot of digital focused news outlets yet. And everybody just kept saying that newspapers won't exist in a few years, so don't go be a newspaper reporter.
Yeah.
So TV just seemed like the most natural thing, and that is what kind of made me fall in love with journalism anyway. So that's why I did that. And at some point, I just realized that, well, you know what, I did it.
Yeah.
10 years or so were great, but I did it, and now I can do something else. And I think the pandemic did kind of wake me up to that in a lot of ways, just like it did to other people too. So again, it really wasn't that hard. It was kind of, it was kind of just born out of necessity, because I was faced with either I can keep doing the same thing and that would be fine, or I could try something else. And I felt like it was time to try something else. And I think the beauty of now is that a lot of people are trying some people have two careers at once.
True.
Which is a whole nother story. But lots of people, make these pivots and take a new direction and find purpose and meaning in it. And that's certainly been my experience. So it's been great.
That's good to hear that, because sometimes you make the pivot and you're like, oh my God, I made it.
Oops.
Oops. Exactly. Oops. And then you're spending another 5 years trying to get back to where you were in general. But I'm glad in this particular case, it's working out for you and you're having a good time. And I think it's always fun because I think at the end of the day, like you just said it, like the people, you get to meet so many different people when you sometimes you do a pivot like that. And then sometimes even I'm going to make the comparison to watching movies because that's all I got for me. But when every month we try to do our foreign film of the month. And when we do that, we get to, in a way, through the film itself, we get to see how other filmmakers around the world decide to make a film. And so in that particular case, when we do a pivot like that, and you get to see how, wow, this has been going on in this career path or this side of the world while I was busy doing this instead, so it kind of broadens your horizon a little bit when you do a pivot like that and you get to see something.
No doubt.
Especially working in the cruise industry, I'm sure you get to travel quite a bit. I don't know if you do or not, but I'm sure that if you do, that's a nice perk on top of that, because every time I think of a cruise ship, it's always a good time.
Yeah.
It is always a good time. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. But yeah, anyway, glad to hear that you're doing great, and again, thank you for coming back after 3 years. It's been way too long. I don't know why we waited 3 years to have you on the show again. I know you've been busy, but this has been a long time coming, and what a movie to kick off, to have you on the show for. So with that, we'll dive into our spoiler review of Joker: Folie, Deux. And Matt, we'll start with you. What were your thoughts on the movie?
We'll start with a really big question. Well, I mean, I hate to say that I went in kind of knowing some of the critical reaction to it, because I do feel like it kind of framed my opinion a little bit.
Absolutely.
But I was honestly expecting, because sometimes my opinion of a movie, or really anything, because I'm kind of a contrarian, still I kind of expected, oh no, I'm going to like it anyway, even though the critics hate it. I'm still going to really find it to be great. And I don't know, maybe maybe it's a grower. You know, it's not. I don't know. Because you know, and I say, because I'm hoping that maybe it will be something that grows on us. And I have heard from people like, don't go to the theater, wait till it's on streaming, and it is going to be on streaming this week, right?
Yes, yeah. So, all the articles are saying by this week it should be ready to be available for purchase and for renting on video on demand. So, and that's been less than a month since its theatrical release, which I wouldn't say is not uncommon, but for a movie like this, very uncommon.
Yeah. Well, I mean, people like watching things from the comfort of their home
absolutely
alone. I watched it from the comfort of a movie theater alone. So that was honestly a pretty unique experience.
Was that a new one for you?
It was a brand new one for me. Yeah, I totally do. But I mean, I think overall, my like general reaction is just that it seemed like a movie that was made to be a really good trailer. And I don't even mean that necessarily to sound funny. It just, it looked great. It had the dark grittiness that you would expect. I even thought the acting was good. The delivery of some pretty memorable lines, all of that was there. But the actual story of it, I just didn't get interested in. And I just thought it seemed like it just wasn't, like the writing wasn't baked, and some of it was just a little too on the nose and not, not layered enough.
So let me ask you two questions here. One, did you see the original Joker?
No.
Okay, all right. So I think that's an important question, because technically you're coming in cold, not knowing what happened in the
completely
event.
Cold. Yeah.
I wouldn't say that you were too far off of not knowing everything that happened, because I think the second movie did a good job of at least picking up the key moments that you needed to know in order to fall into Folie à Deux. But you missed some of the kind of you got the broad strokes for the sequel. You missed some of the fine details that they didn't go over. But the second thing was that, how often do you go to the theaters? Because I feel like a theater experience is, if you're already not accustomed to going to the theater, some people don't like to go to the theater and watch movies. They rather be at home, like you were saying. So, was that also hindering part of your experience as well?
No, I wouldn't say that, because I do like going to see a movie. And I would say probably, maybe once a month, something like that.
Okay.
So not super often, but often enough.
What was the last movie you saw in theater before Joker?
You're really putting me on the spot.
It's like, damn, Matt, I wasn't ready for all that.
The toughest
terrible memory. What was the movie I saw?
You could think on it and come back to it.
I'll come back to it.
We'll come back to it. All right. Ernesto, what about you? What were your thoughts on the Joker?
It was weird. We were introduced to this jukebox musical, and you get at the very beginning you get this open animated sequence, and then with Arthur and his shadow self, and you get this very happy song overlay over on top. It almost set the tone for it. I didn't hate it, but I also didn't love it. I'm somewhere in the middle, closer to not really not liking it. But I felt like there were certain things, there are things to appreciate about it, kind of understanding you're in his delusional mind and her delusional mind, and kind of had the Folie that shared delusion that they have together in their animated sequences. The one out of everything, I know I read some reports that like told Lady Gaga to sing bad, but I still find myself enjoying her voice. Like she was just her voice is so, it's like butter. Her voice is so smooth. It's just so good. I loved all her music. I loved hearing her voice. So to me, I even if the movie was bad, like I got to enjoy the music just listening to Lady Gaga sing.
Yeah, and I think going into this, I was actually quite surprised of the overly negative reactions that was coming from the audience, was coming from the critics. I think, if anything, that was the thing that I was most shocked about. It was almost like universally, everybody hated this movie. And that's typically not the case. Typically, maybe critics don't like it, but fans love it. Sometimes, like, critics love it, but fans don't. Sometimes the critics and the fans are in agreement, but I don't feel like it's often that both the critics and the fans are both in agreement that this movie is terrible. And so it took me, I don't know, like 2 weeks after the movie came out for us to actually go over and watch it. There wasn't like a drive to go watch this movie as maybe some other comic book movies have been in the past. And like, I was not the biggest fan of the original Joker, so that wasn't a drive for me to go watch it either going into the sequel. I was often one of those people on the campus like, wait, they're making a sequel? Why?
Yeah.
Why were they making a sequel? It feels pretty finite of how the movie ended. And we'll get into reasons how and why that happened in the first place, but main reason, spoiler alert, money. But yeah, so going into it, you've already have 2 weeks removed from its release, all this negativity going to the movie. And Matt, the reason why, I asked you about your movie theater experience, because we've often on this podcast talk about a lot about expectations. What you expect going into a movie, no matter if you're watching at home or in the theater, affects your experience when watching that movie. If you're expecting something, if you're expecting it to be good, or you're expecting to go in a certain way, and then it doesn't, you think the movie's bad because it didn't go in your line, and not actually thinking about it as a whole on what the movie is trying to say. And so I don't think it's as bad as the overly negative response has been on it. Yeah. But I also don't think it's a good movie either.
Yeah, it's somewhere in the middle of that. Like, it's not good, but it's not awful.
Right. And then
I agree, it's not awful. 100% agree that it's not awful. And that's why I say that I worry that that knowing the overt negative reaction to it might have even clouded my judgment and made me not so in love with it.
Yeah.
Right.
But because then again, objectively, I just still don't think it was. My biggest thing was I was wondering as I was watching it, do these insanely talented people, right? Because Joaquin Phoenix, great actor.
Yep.
Lady Gaga, amazing at everything she does.
Correct.
Were they like going, we all have those jobs sometimes or tasks we do where we just go through the motions and we check the box, but you don't expect that, right?
Yeah, not on this level.
A movie of this magnitude, and I just kind of wonder if that was partly at play there, because to the point you made, Matt, that this movie was made because I did know that the last one made $1 billion at the box office, which creates obviously the inertia necessary to have a sequel. So I just wondered that, like, do these, and that kept playing in my head, are these incredibly talented people wondering, like, why isn't there a better script? Because as they're telling this story.
I mean, honestly, you're not wrong there, because ultimately, when you really think about it, like, what was the problem with this movie? It goes down to the script. Because the acting wasn't bad, the way the movie was shot wasn't bad, the music wasn't bad, everything else was basically fine. It was like, if this was in any other context, like this movie was made well. It's not like amateurs made this. This is a high caliber Hollywood movie. So what was wrong? It was, to your point, Matt, it was the script. The script, it just doesn't prove its existence, given that it's a sequel to the original Joker. Like, what message was it trying to say at the end of the day? And did we, what what were we saying about any of this? And I know, again, we'll dive into it a little bit later, but a lot of people did not like the ending. People were just almost offended by how the movie ended.
See, but and I actually, when we get to the ending, we'll talk about it. I totally understood the ending. To me, the ending made sense. I was actually completely fine with the ending.
I didn't have any problem with it.
Neither did I. To be honest. Like, it made sense.
Because honestly, this movie needed to be over.
Well, that too.
So that was my question. I was wondering for you guys, because you guys are the experts. Could it have even been solved in the edit? Could this have been an hour-and-a-half movie instead of a 2.5-hour movie?
Yeah, easy. Oh, yeah.
That became a better movie because some of that stupid stuff got edited out.
Right. You make a good point because, this movie could have been 90 minutes.
Yeah, I would cut the animated sequence in the beginning.
Yeah.
That's like 5 or 6 minutes right there. Like, you don't need it. You don't really need it.
I didn't hate the animated.
I didn't hate it either. But as far as like if we want to chop stuff for time, that would probably to me that would have been the first to go.
Yeah, honestly, you could have chopped up 2 musical numbers and saved yourself 20 minutes.
Oh, which one would you cut there? Which musical number would you cut?
Now you put me on the spot because look, I'm going to be honest with you. Every detail about this movie, do I remember? Absolutely not. Can I even list you one song that was sung in this movie? No, I couldn't. Except for the one that they sang, "Hello, get happy." That one's the only one I remember. Other than that, I could not tell you any. Like, full disclosure, I nodded off at one point. Ernesto and I were talking about this. There was a whole plot point that I completely missed because I went to go watch the breakdown video, and I was like, wait, what? When did Lady Gaga say she was pregnant? Did I miss something?
When did they have sex?
I did like that juxtaposition though of her character being the manipulator.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was interesting. And again, with a shorter movie, that might have actually like been told better and been a little bit more apparent. I think it just went on for so long that it almost got a little annoying. But like, if it were a little punchier, I thought that was actually kind of cool and interesting.
Even if we have gotten more of Lady Gaga kind of planting the seeds of her deception.
Mm-hmm.
Like maybe if we had gotten more, since it is their shared delusion, like why didn't we get more of hers and what she was like implanting into him and like kind of, especially since, you know, his arc ends with, unfortunately, his demise, like to see like how she planned and played into that, I think would have made the movie, would have made it a little bit better.
Yeah, and there's some cases where this is more Lady Gaga's movie than it is Joaquin Phoenix's movie. Like her character had an arc. I mean, I guess both of them did, but like I would have, to your point, I would have loved to get more out of Lady Gaga from this movie. In a way, I feel like she was wasted in the story that she was given, rather because
not
like
in a good way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's like I feel like they could have utilized her and her talents a lot more rather than just being like, you know, like, to your point, like a manipulator to the Joker as well as, and then just there to sing and dance. Like I think there could have been more to that, to her character. But let's dive into some of the details. And you know, we've already mentioned before, Folie Deux, meaning, just in case who don't know, Joker Folie Deux. The Folie Deux meaning is the delusion of or mental illness shared by two people in close association. So that is obviously what this is. You know, we have two people kind of going in their way, going along this delusion, and we kind of learn later that, you know, Lee Quinzel is Lady Gaga's character's name, who is essentially an alternate version of Harley Quinn. She is in her own delusion that we kind of later find out, and to your point, she's the manipulator and kind of feeding into, or kind of helping, or feeding into Arthur Fleck's illusion or disillusion that he is the Joker, and kind of reigniting that, and something that was kind of lost.
Or her whole thing was that she saw him as Joker. To her, Arthur was the mask and Joker was the true person underneath. Because during the entire movie, she never refers to him as Arthur until she's on the steps with him after he has that display in court where he says that there is no Joker. That's the only time in the entire movie where she refers to him as Arthur. And even when they're in the cell, and she's talking to him. She's before they have sex or whatever. She
or did they?
What do you? They did. What do you mean?
I thought that was
no, because she gave him the
makeup.
makeup. That's the only reason why. She gave him the makeup that he would use, that he would later use in court. And she tells him, and she's like,
none of that.
She puts the makeup on him. She goes, "Oh, look, now I can see you." And then that's when she starts to call him Joker, and it's just obviously madness.
Yeah, and honestly, like there's parts where maybe that was intentional. There were parts I didn't know what was real and what was the delusion, what was the fantasy element of it. Like that whole prison scene when she goes and it's like, "Oh, the guards let me in." I was like, "What? How does that work out? Like how much pull do you have within the prison system that you can just go into a maximum security, like, because he was like in a different part of the prison because he was being punished for something that he did that I don't remember. But yeah, there was that part. So how did you get that far into the system to then have a conversation or a face-to-face conversation with the Joker at that moment?
I saw that as them playing into the whole celebrity, the sensualization of his trial, like it being the first one that's ever being televised. People would look at him as a star. Look at Brendan Gleeson's character. He would talk to him with disdain, like, "Oh, you think you're a star, Arthur?" He's like, "Oh, I got you into this music class because you're somewhat of a celebrity around here." So I think that, to me, that's how I played it. Like, well, it seems like, since this is the first one, a lot of people have different things invested in it. So maybe you're able to get away with little things here and there because you know how high profile this case is.
And if I'm not mistaken, they said that she came from a rich parents, right? She was like a wealthy family,
and she was a graduate student. In the comic books, she's a psychiatrist who treats the Joker, and then the Joker actually turns her into Harley Quinn.
Right, and in this case, they kind of flipped the script a little bit,
which I thought was interesting. I thought it was an interesting take on their relationship.
Even like so. The beginning of the movie, having the animated opening sequence, me and my shadow, kind of a reimagining / recapping the ending of the first film. I also, as much as maybe to your point, Ernesto, it wasn't needed, I actually didn't mind it because then, in a way, you kind of see maybe the Joker's dissolution and what he had. Like, it wasn't Arthur who killed. Like, it was the Joker who killed Marty, not it was Murray. Yeah, it was not Arthur who did it. It was a Joker, and he was being persuaded by the Joker to commit these crimes.
It does kind of cap off that in the first one that Murray is the one who actually created the Joker, because what happens in the first movie is that it's like a late night show, like your Johnny Carson or Seth Meyers or Jimmy Fallon, where they're showing a clip from his set and they're making fun of him, and he refers to him, "Oh, look at this Joker," and that's really where he takes on the Joker persona, because then immediately follows everybody on live TV making fun of him, and then the producers from the Murray Show call him on and saying that he loved them, and then he shows up with the Joker makeup, and then it's that same back and forth where they're making fun of him, and they have this interaction, and it ends with him, blowing his head off. So I do like that they, I did say you could take it off, but it is important to showcase that they created him. They created this monster that they're trying to get rid of now. They created this Joker persona that led to the death of this TV host.
And Matt, you said you actually enjoyed the opening sequence.
I did, but maybe that's because I needed the playset. So I appreciated that.
Did that go through your mind? Like, okay, did you understand that this was like recapping something, or did you just kind of along for the ride for a little bit?
I think I was just along for the ride, but it made it make some sense, right? As I continued watching the movie. Plus, I don't know. I think it connected the comic book world for me to the movie world in a fun way.
Oh, okay.
So I liked it.
Yeah. And then as the movie opens up, we see Arthur Fleck in prison with the guards prepping him to visit his lawyer, who plans on taking his case for the trial of 5 people. We later find out, well, not later. For us, the audience already knew that it was actually 6 people because they did not know that he killed his mother as well. But he's only on trial for 5 until he confesses that it was actually 6. His lawyer defends that Arthur Fleck did not commit those murders, but rather the Joker and Arthur was suffering from a mental illness. Then later along the lines, because of the popularity, and this for some reason this was going to be the first televised court case, which I don't think that would have been honestly, that just seems like a bad move all around. Like, I'm not sure what was the goal of having this be the first televised court case in this world, because this movie was taking place in the 80s, and how much stir that this, all the anarchy that happened outside. Why would you think? To me, they were kind of feeding into the idea.
I think that was the point. I think that was the whole. I think that was the whole point of it, is that, like, you have this massive event that's created all this chaos, but then now we have this industry that's capitalizing on that. Mm-hmm. But then but then it's one of those damned if you do, damned if you don't. You're not going to talk about this case that literally lit the city on fire, like.
I guess, but that could have been, not every court case needed. I don't think it needs to be televised. I think it just caused drama, obviously, and maybe there's a lot of attention on it. And then there's even a point where even the judge was like, "This will not be a circus. You're not gonna make this courtroom into your stage." And but by putting it on camera, it is already an act, a stage, a performance. To me, they Joker didn't have to do anything for that. The media, decide to do that in general. Whoever idea was it to televise it, you're the one that's putting it on stage, and then it's up for everyone else to determine, the people who are involved in the case to treat it as a stage or not. But yeah, I find it interesting that throughout Lady Gaga's character, we eventually get to meet her, and she's playing Lee Quinzel. We learned that she was not required to stay in Arkham. She checked herself in. She's come from I think it said a rich doctor's daughter and she has a psychology degree, who faked her illness and lied to her parents, and lied that her parents or her father was dead. And then obviously she fell in love with the idea of Joker. And so I wonder, I would have loved to have gotten a little bit more on that. I feel like those were just broad strokes that we learned that information, but kind of why. Unless I'm wrong, I don't remember ever getting the why she kind of fell in love with the idea of the Joker and wanted to kind of lie about everything.
I think they just said it that she was just obsessed, that she watched him on TV blow Murray's brains out. They had that interaction when they first met, saying that she idolized him in that moment. And I think she just, from there, she fell in love with Arthur. She put herself there to be next to him, and then to infect her way into his life.
Yeah, I guess that's okay. And then we kind of see that throughout the court case. She's by his side, kind of feeding into it. But then the moment she actually wears her costume, I guess she has a moment where she's putting on her own makeup, and then she's in this outfit. That was the moment where kind of Arthur Fleck was like, "There's no Joker, it's just me," and that kind of cut off the illusion. I feel like we could have had a little bit more. It just felt like it was done. We were just done with the storyline. We also find out that this is, I feel like, very commenting to the times that we even live in now, was that we learned that there was a TV movie based on the events of the first film that we never saw. We never saw that. And I can't imagine that it was probably referencing Ryan Murphy's attempts of recreating court cases like American Crime Story and the Monster series with Jeffrey Dahmer. Just recently, they came out with the Menendez brothers. That's on Netflix right now.
And it's caused their case to be reopened. How crazy is that? Just as a side note, all the press from the Menendez brothers show. So another parallel example. That show has caused the Menendez brothers case to be reopened and be reviewed.
I did not know that.
That was wild.
That's interesting. Yeah. But I would like to think that Todd Phillips, at least writing that in there, was kind of commenting on the fact that our society is kind of drawn to these
true crime,
these particular true crime, particular personnels of, you know, who do these horrific acts, and then like our fixation on them, not only with the media but also, you know, with Lady Gaga's character as well.
For sure.
Do you think it would have meant anything if we actually saw like a piece of it?
I think it would have been nice to see a trailer of it in the background, just like snippets of it, because there was some back and forth in certain scenes where they were like, was it good? And then in the court case, somebody refers to it as awful, and then Arthur literally turns around and looks at her and she's like, no, it was great. And then, you know, Lee says that she's seen it like 4 or 5 times, so it's different how people who are attached to him look at those things through different, how people look at things through different lenses and have different takeaways from the same thing.
Do you think that instead of the opening moment animated, we were given a snippet of the TV movie that was being referenced? Do you think that would have served better for the overall story rather than the opening sequence that we got?
Are you asking me or Matt? I wasn't sure.
Oh, I guess Matt, we'll start with you. I mean, well, I guess there's no context with Matt, I guess, but I'll ask the question to Matt. Do you think, would you have preferred to see the TV movie rather than the animated short that we got?
Maybe that you bring it up, and I hadn't even thought of it that way, but I didn't even really consider that the TV movie was maybe a comment on society's recent fixation with that very thing, the documentaries and the TV series that are based on them. And I just thought it was interesting that you even brought up Brian Murphy specifically.
Yeah.
Because I felt like that first, one of the first musical breaks that we got reminded me so much of American Horror Story in that second season, where I'm probably going
What's that, Asylum? Second season is Asylum?
Here.
Yeah.
Asylum, right, exactly.
Yeah.
Where Jessica Lange's character, the nun, fantasizes about the name game, the jukebox, and starts singing, and it gives you that like musical break. And it just really reminded me of that. So I think that's interesting. And maybe if it was a snippet from the TV show, that might be a further comment on society, because I do think overall, if there's one thing that I really do like about the movie, I like the comment that it makes about society, or at least how I perceive the point that the movie's trying to make,
right?
Which is that we don't want reality, right? When she tells him that all we had was the fantasy, it's very Tennessee Williams, Blanche Dubois, I want magic, not realism.
Right.
To me, I that's why I liked the ending, because I think it kind of is a comment on our society and how obsessed we get over social media and the things that we see that are not necessarily true, but we want them to be, you know? And then when we're faced with the truth and we don't like it anymore, so we just walk away from it.
Right.
At least that's kind of what I took from the movie overall. I
mean, that's probably a very like astute way of looking at it, honestly. Like if we're really diving into it, like yeah, because it makes sense to me. Like at least as a comment that it's made, which is why overall I don't think we're saying that it's necessarily a bad movie. Like everything, there's a lot about it that makes sense, but then there's something about it that also does like all those things don't equal to good. So why is that? You know,
I think what's interesting is that there's a lot of little takeaways that you can take from like a lot of the subliminal meanings from this movie. What I appreciate, whether it's good or bad, is that this movie causes conversation. Like it's causing like you to think. It's causing us to think and talk about things that, like, you know, this is a jukebox musical. Like, how is it that we're having a conversation about stuff like this? And just the fact that they were able to weave it into that narrative. I mean, I get it. There are some things to appreciate about it.
All right, well, you mentioned the musical. Let's talk about the music in this movie. I feel like in some ways we've gotten two different musical elements. One, that was very fantasy. Obviously, like we cut away to them, in like a
Sunny. It was like Sunny and Cher.
Yeah, it felt very. I think I was reading that took inspiration from Chicago. At least Todd Phillips was. This is like Todd Phillips' version of Chicago in a way. And then we got Grounded. Music that was like they were either singing out loud to each other. Like obviously, music played a big part into this. And I was reading a couple of articles to see like if they stuck to one musical element, or if it was either stick to the fantasy element of the musicals or more grounded element to the musicals, like or to the songs. Like it kept going. It kept being too much. And so I guess Ernesto, I'll start with you with this question. Do you think they should have either one stuck with either a grounded musical sense, or a fantasy musical sense, or take out the music?
I'm going to be honest with you. I was totally okay with it. Like it did not bother me. Because in the whole, even in the first movie, like Joker, Arthur wants to be an entertainer. And then we literally, one of the most iconic scenes in the first movie is him dancing and doing all those thrusting that became like the part of the movie that literally became a meme is him dancing down the stairs. Yeah. Right before he goes on the Murray show, he has like this moment where he's dancing behind the curtain. So I felt like that element of him wanting to be an entertainer is what influenced this to be a musical, because now he's a celebrity. Now he's famous. So now he gets to perform. So now the performance, and now that he has Harley, he feels he can sing out loud for people to hear him. I mean, one of the first songs he sings out loud is when he has that interview with Patty, and then he stands up and sings to the camera how he professes his love for Lee. If it was for once when he does For Once in My Life, and that actually happened, whereas all the other ones were mainly except for when the prison broke out, which was both of them together. They both were actually singing. It didn't that wasn't part of their delusion. It wasn't until after that we get the delusional, the fantasy singing. It was fun.
So you think? So you didn't run into the fact that they were kind of bouncing.
It took me a minute. When I was watching the interview, I was like, is this happening? But then when he kicked the chair back and the guy looked at him, and then we cut to the lawyer and the producer in the cell, and next to them in the cell, she's telling him to cut, and he's like, we're not going to cut on this, which I also feel is another note on that. Like, what are we doing? We're in this prison, and we're going to roll on this inmate singing. Good. We're just going to show everybody this. We don't feel the need to cut to commercial or not show people this. We're going to show everybody this. All right, let's just keep rolling. Yeah. This is busy, but to them that's entertainment. And one of the songs that Lady Gaga sings, which she sings right before she walks into the court case, is her singing. The first time she sings, that's entertainment.
Yeah, and actually, I took a note here is that when the film that Arthur and Lee were watching in the prison was 1953's The Bandwagon, and they were singing the line, and I wrote down the line here: a clown with his pants falling down, or a dance that's a dream of romance, or a scene where the villain is mean, that's entertainment. And I think that short line there, these few short phrases was kind of almost a way encapsulated the whole film in general. Clown with the pants falling down, a dance that's a dream, a romance that's seen, a villain that's mean, that's entertainment. That's what it is. Even that was the closing. That was the last thing that Lady Gaga said to the Joker was like, what do you mean? Was like, what do you mean? It's all fake. It's all real. She's like, that's entertainment, baby, and then kind of walks off. But Matt, what do you think about the musical elements of this movie?
I like the musical elements, and I'll have to rewatch, I guess, for streaming for sure, because I thought when he sang For Once in My Life, I thought that was delusion. And the thing that I liked probably, I guess I went into it knowing that it's about delusion because I looked up what the title means, right?
Right. Yeah, like we all did.
Sure. Yeah, like we all did. And I'm always drawn to things too that kind of teeter on the on madness. I just always have found that very interesting. So I love the musical elements, and again, I think it only works because it's delusion. Whereas if they tried to make it serious, make a very serious musical out of it, it wouldn't have made sense. And I love the point about that's entertainment, because again, I just feel like it kind of goes back to the way that I saw the movie, which is that it's all performance. It's all so performative. And even like what happens in the courtroom is so performative. And so I think for me that worked. Again, it's just contract, right? Like we didn't need quite as much of it. As
I feel like in a way, in some cases, I feel like in some songs there was a purpose behind the musical elements, and then there was other moments where it's like, here's another musical like break, and I was like, so what are we saying with this one again? It's like I just feel like that's like, let's just do a song and dance. Like, why not? And then to the point, that's entertainment. We're just here to kind of mess around a little bit, and sometimes it makes sense and sometimes it doesn't. And if that's the point, I don't like the mind messery, man. I don't. I don't think it needs to be spoon fed to me. But if you're making a lot, if you're making a movie, have a point to it. But also, we can, as we get closer to the end, there's rumors that there wasn't a point to this movie. Then Todd Phillips was actually making a statement by all this. But that we'll get to that in a second. But yeah, I do find. Also, part of what the musical elements, and a lot of people were complaining about in the sense of how many musical beats that there were, contributed to the large budget that this movie had. Like in comparison, the first Joker movie was made with $60 million, and the second was made with $200. And people are like, why was this movie needed to be almost more than 3 times your budget from the first film? And there are some other elements to that. But one of them has got to be the fantasy musical elements that they went into that budget for sure. And don't get me wrong, they all look great. It looked entertaining for the eyes, but it just going back to the script, it just didn't make any sense. And at least some of the elements didn't make any sense. And honestly, the first hour of this movie, up until we get to the court case, wasn't bad. Like, I think, like, everything we've talked about so far leading into the court case, I don't think, I was on board with this movie up until we got to the court case. I don't know if there's any moment that you feel like it was dragging before that. Ernesto, I don't know if you felt the same way or not.
No, because I thought the stuff with the guard, I like that. Him and his relationship with Brendan Gleeson, I thought worked really well. You have this guard, somebody who has this power over him, but he's also like, what's the word? He's jealous. He has this like weird jealousy about him, even though then he takes it out on him as they abuse him in so many different ways. He gets him into that music class. So I thought, to me, all that, we first were introduced to Lady Gaga's character. I thought that was really interesting. It was somewhere in the middle. I think you're right. Somewhere in the middle, around the court, in the middle of the court case is where it started to lose me.
Yeah, and then I don't know if it's just like this wasn't a very entertaining court drama. Like, you know what I mean? Like
maybe if we had to cut something out, maybe if you take out some of the stuff from the court case, and you could have left all the fantasy stuff, but just give us highlights of what happened in court, because at the end of the day, I don't know, it wasn't really that important. Like, it was important, but I felt like everything else was more important.
Yeah, and then I guess there was a benefit for you, Matt, because a lot of what happened in the court case and the trials and the witnesses, like, they were just recapping the events.
See, I guess that's true,
movie.
though. That's right. That's a good point, though. So they made it so that someone who didn't go see the original one can still understand the second one completely in its entirety. So I get it.
I guess in relation to the trial, which I don't know if we needed either. Like, honestly, we could have lived in a world where this movie stayed in prison and him and Harley are just in this fantasy land together. Like there's a world that we didn't even need the court case to begin with, and then this could have been a completely different story with them just having this illusion in Arkham.
But then you don't get the element of them televising the court case or him getting out and seeing like the people who were obsessed with him seeing all the different kinds of people who were obsessed with him. And then we don't get that interaction with him and Lee at the end where she finally calls him Arthur. So then how do you get that interaction?
Right.
You don't get his realization and his going back on everything that then causes Lee to leave him. So
yeah, it's almost in a way by the end of it you feel sympathy for him, and I don't think that's what I was intending to feel at the end of the day.
Even though it's funny you bring that up. So when he has that monologue at the end where he's basically denouncing the whole Joker persona, and when Lee leaves him, like literally half the court leaves him, and you hear this like audible groan. So it's just like these people who were like following him, almost like internet fads. Like once it stops becoming interesting, we're just gonna stop and move on to the next thing. Because that's like once he said it, that's literally what happened. Half the court got up and left, and it was like, okay, move on. Next thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then because that was also when the court, like there was a bomb
afterwards
that exploded next to like shortly after, like he was like doing his last testimony. Yeah, but yeah, so even kind of leading in before that, we talked about how Lee got herself into solitary confinement, which I feel like Ernesto, this might be a point where I disagree with you. I don't think that any of that was real. I think that was all in his head. There's no way she got herself in there.
I don't know. I see it as a play on the celebrity, the high profileness and his celebrity status in regards to this trial within this world. I get what you're saying. I totally trust me. I thought about it. I thought it too, but I don't know. It just seems because she gives him the makeup that he literally uses in court the next day. That's the only reason why I say that.
Matt, where do you?
That might be. Well, that might be another like interesting layer of interest that the movie leaves you a little bit confused about what was delusion and what.
Maybe that's on purpose.
Yeah.
So maybe it is. Maybe it is growing on us. You guys.
That's what I'm saying. Like I'm gonna be honest. Like I actually saw this movie twice. Which I usually don't do, and that's only because, like Matt said, when I first saw it, I kind of nodded off a little bit, but like I didn't like it. But then something like now, like little things like that happened from the movie, like I found myself like thinking about plot points or really trying to like pick apart why he did a certain thing that made me want to go see it again, and I felt like I got more out of it the second time. I was able to appreciate more the second time than I did the first time. Like, yeah, maybe not be a great movie, but there is a lot to appreciate on the different elements he was trying to portray to us.
Yeah, I guess I can kind of see that too, because me personally, I went back and rewatched the original Joker after not seeing it since I saw it the first time 5 years ago. And I actually found myself enjoying it more the second time, 5 years removed from the film, than the first time I watched it.
And I feel like movie is sadder when you've seen the second one, so you understand like the context of what's to come. You almost look at it as like a prequel to something you've just seen. I feel like the story hits a little bit sadder the first one. But I agree with you. I really enjoyed enjoyed the first one when I rewatched it for this.
Did you like it the first time?
I liked it the first time, but I liked it even more now. I felt like I was able to appreciate it more now.
I think appreciation more now for me, just because I wasn't a fan of it the first time I watched it.
And I think a lot of the themes from the first one carried over to the second one, because the end of the first one, we're talking about like coverage of certain events. Like you have all these different, you get this wide shot of all these different stations, and then it's like one by one is picking up the breaking news of the Murray being shot, and then it's like it turns into everybody covering the exact same thing. So it's like, and that is what leads right into this one. So there's a lot of themes that were placed in the first one that's carried over into this film as well.
Yeah, you also hear it in the radio like the radio news for when he's in the van being transferred from prison to the court, and you see that he's listening to people comment about the trial. Speaking of which, we're now in the courtroom. We start beginning to see that he's taking this as a stage. Joker confronts Lee about her lies. I guess this is the part where I fell asleep on, where he later finds out that Lee has been lying to him the whole time. And, she did not have to be in Arkham and all this stuff. And then she confesses, she's like, yeah, you're right, I did lie. And then apparently lied again that she was pregnant.
Well, she never said if she was or was. She said that she was, but she never said that she wasn't pregnant. She never answered.
When asked, she said when confronted with that question at the very end, that was when she delivered the line, "That's entertainment."
Okay.
So to me, I took it as it was all an act.
I think you're right.
Like we were just all feeding into the fantasy, or unless she was like, yeah, I'm still pregnant, and that's entertainment.
It's my baby. This baby's the real Joker.
I can't imagine that. Can you imagine? That would be a twist. Honestly, you just brought
Spawn of Joker.
Well, we did get the real, from what I interpret, is the real Joker at the very end. Which they planted seeds. That seed they planted throughout the entire film.
They did, yes. And then we see an iconic scene that was from the trailer where they're talking to each other through the glass. We see Lady Gaga draw a smile with her lipstick onto the glass. And they said it took them 3 hours to perfect that.
I believe that, because not only you have to get his head moving correctly, you have to get the placement of the lipstick. Yeah. There's also a rack focus that goes between him and back to the glass. Like, all that has to be timed out precisionally. I mean, the cinematography in this movie was absolutely gorgeous. There are some scenes that were just really well constructed. I mean, that small cell scene, and you have that single source of light coming from the window. I mean, I thought that was just so close. They did a really good job, like that one specifically, making it so close and intimate for that moment that they needed in there.
Yeah, and the director, I was watching a video about it, then they were interviewing the director, and he's saying that there was one point where it was like they're on the scene for so long, they were like, is this even worth it anymore? It's like they were questioning it until they got it right, and then they noticed that, like, okay, this is worth the time. And basically the director was trying to symbolize a way of Arthur kind of leaning into portraying the Joker. Like, he was influenced by Lee and the supporters, and they were commenting on the unhinged society in Gotham rather than wanting to be the Joker himself. This was him physically leaning into it and smiling, and was like, okay, I guess I will be the Joker now, which then continued on to Arthur fully embracing the Joker character in court. He fires his attorney,
and kisses her,
and he kisses her, wants to represent himself, kind of feeding into what kind of like I said, the unhinged society wants him to do, and that's what creates the entertainment. And then I believe it was when they were cross-examining Gary Puddles was when it kind of puts Arthur back into his place, that I think he realizes that this is not a stage for himself, and this is not a game, that people were affected by this, even though, aside from murder, like people that he thought were close friends were still affected by his actions. And I would like to believe that was a turning point for his character to be like, I am no longer the Joker. And Matt, I'm not sure if you felt the same way, not having seen the first film, because we saw what happened in the first movie, and this character returned for the court, which was crazy in the first movie. But I'm not sure if you felt the same way.
I think it just made me wonder if the movie was trying to say that with evil there's no redemption. And I don't know if that's like too heady, but that it almost like didn't really matter how he felt,
right?
Because even after he comes to terms and doesn't and kind of gives up on being Joker, the pain and whatever is caused, and then the delusion of everybody else stands, right? It doesn't matter that he feels bad or whatever you want to say. So I don't know. That's just kind of what I got from it.
Yeah, and then even the scene that follows that, like I think he was back in prison. Arthur was then stripped down and beaten by the guards, and then because of one of his supporters were like chanting him in prison, I think the guards accidentally or purposely, I think it's really clear at that moment, killed one of the inmates who was supporting Joker.
I think that was part of to me that was part of like Brendan Gleeson's arc. Because it was him, he was singing the song that he sings in the beginning where the Saints go marching in. And he gets so mad because he's telling him to shut up that he chokes him out. And then I think in his anger, like he just meant to hurt him, but I don't think that he meant to kill him. Because you hear the other guards comment on it like, oh, God, you killed him. And I mean, they just moved on. They're like, whatever, just another Tuesday.
Yeah. And I guess in a way, again, this was, I guess now the character of Arthur realizing that between his interactions with Gary Puddles as the Joker and then the Joker persona is affecting all these people. So I guess in a way I'm not sure if we're meant to feel sympathy for him in this moment, but I feel like that's what, in some ways, maybe that they were alluding to. That's like, oh, we should now feel sorry for the Joker because now he feels bad for his actions, but it's still murder, and we should not feel sorry for that. And so then we get, we go back to the trial. He's reading off He's basically giving his closing remarks saying that he is guilty. People started leaving. The jury comes back with a verdict, and they are finding him guilty with at least 3 charges before the bomb goes off in the courtroom, killing hundreds of people. One of them being, which we never talked about before, the other attorney, which was Harvey Dent. Which I don't know if that was that served for me zero.
Well, no,
zero
it was. It was just. But it's the same thing like having Bruce Wayne's. I mean, well, they were actually a part. Harvey Dent was part of the story too, but it's having like Batman characters in the background, like not really like drawing attention to it. Except for this is how Harvey Dent gets his face disfigured with the explosion. That's like the one. This is how Two-Face was created in this world, almost.
But matters. It meant nothing. Like, I think to me, the fact that this movie, even given the sequel, was meant to go nowhere to begin with. Why even give a semi-origin story for Harvey Dent rather than like fans expect?
Because the first one gave us how Batman was created. Because they show you his parent. You get the scene at the end of his parents being killed, but it's caused by what Arthur did to Murray. Like that was the catalyst for that event to happen.
I guess we're kind of following suit on that, just for another Easter egg for the fans, I guess. And then, to my opinion, this was the best shot in the whole movie for me. Was this impressive one shot of we're following Arthur after the explosion, and he's slowly exiting the courtroom. He sees a person that's dressed more like the Joker than he is. Kind of picks him up, throws him in a taxi or a car, and it was saying, bro, this is crazy. And then this whole time, and then even the Arthur escaping the car and kind of running into the street was all a one shot. And I feel like for that to happen nearly toward the end of the movie, when I feel like most people have already given up on it, I was like, oh, okay. Like as a movie fan and as a person who enjoys clever shots, this was like a little nugget for me to kind of see that kind of all the way toward the end of the movie. I'm sure, Ernesto, you picked up on that.
I actually missed this one. I didn't see it. I must have missed that part. I didn't realize. But you're always better at catching those than me. But
that's fair. That's fair. But yeah, I was pretty impressed with having a one shot this late in the game when I feel like that there wasn't a lot of kind of reason for it. There honestly wasn't a lot of action beats in the movie rather than your musical elements and going back and forth and kind of just conversating with other people. But yeah, and then we again talking about apparently this is another part that I missed. Apparently Lee was staying in Arthur's apartment when she got out of prison. Did you guys pick up on that?
She tells him that she bought the apartment that him and his mom, and because he goes, why? I don't want to go there.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess in one way this was another way that Lee was kind of following along with the illusion of it. I didn't understand the purpose of why she bought it, except for feeding her own delusion of like, this is where we would live together, I guess. Like this is where the murder was. This is where the murder happened. So, I'm rich. I can just buy this out.
Right.
And, yeah.
It's like hallowed ground to her.
Sorry, say it again.
It's like hallowed ground to her. She's,
Yes. And then we get to the Arthur runs away from, and then Lee, like Arthur finds Lee on the steps. I'm not sure if that was intentional or not, or just happenstance that she was up there. Maybe he knew where she was going to be because they didn't really have much communication. Last time we saw her, she left the courtroom. So whatever. And then, as you said earlier, Lee turns to him after they're talking about, we can start our life together. And she's like, no, you screwed up, man. You said you weren't Joker no more, and that's all I had. And then to the point, or like Ernesto said earlier, she told him that all we had was a fantasy, and you gave it up. Arthur asked about the baby. She didn't answer, and just saying that's entertainment, and kind of walks off. And shortly after she walked off, the prison guards found him very quickly, mind you. I don't know if they instinct was to go back to his apartment, but that's where he was, and then they take him back to prison. Then we get back to a more subdued Arthur back into the prison. The guard said he has a visitor, but I believe that there was no visitor, and that was all a ploy based on the other guard to the other inmate to get Arthur alone so he can go and stab him and basically have his demise and have his death. Arthur's then laying on the floor. There was a cutaway of a previous musical number highlighting the lyrics. I was a fine young son to take my place. I'll leave my son in heaven on earth with the good Lord's grace. Applying that Arthur is passing the torch to another Joker, which we kind of see in the background of the person who stabbed him as this character is dying. I think they were insinuating that he was using that same knife to cut a smile into his face, where a lot of people heard it, and a lot of people are drawing parallels to Heath Ledger's Joker, and went as even far as saying that was like an inspiration to lead into Heath Ledger's Joker, which I don't put that two and two together at all. But a lot of people were upset. Ernesto, I'll start with you with this question. A lot of people were upset with that ending because you technically killed off the Joker, and it was just to lead into another.
But I think that was, to me, that was the whole point about how, you turned your back on this thing. Well, guess what? There's somebody waiting in line to replace you. And they literally show him, this guy is placed throughout different points of the movie. The movie makes it a point to cut to that character watching him. So you spend the whole movie of watching him idolize him. He's watching him. Think about people who idolize people on social media. They're watching him all the time. Oh, he's not going to do it anymore? Well, I'm going to be his replacement and go even further than he did. So Arthur, he never cut his face, but he drew the paint. He drew the Joker smile on his face. Whereas this guy took it to the next level, takes him out, and then carves the next step because he's willing to be the next best Joker. That's kind of how I took it. I was for it. I mean, it made total sense.
Matt, being a little bit removed from the comic book world, and what were your thoughts on the ending?
I liked the ending, and I thought that, to me, the message wasn't so much that this is the real Joker, but that the Joker is an idea, right? And the Joker, it doesn't matter who embodies the Joker, that it's just kind of an idea. Whoever, kind of to your point, Ernesto, if after you, someone else is waiting in line to be the next and be the best. And it kind of just falls in line with the whole delusion of it all. That kind of if almost that Arthur wasn't living up to the standard of the Joker anymore, so he had to go because he wasn't living up to the idea. He wasn't evil enough. So this guy was gonna cure that and be the sort of real Joker. Yeah. But again, it's just that it's like a meta thing, like an idea.
Yeah, I was gonna. Yeah, sorry.
No, you go ahead. No, you go ahead.
You have something. Okay. Yeah, what's interesting was that this was a very similar message that was in the first movie. The only difference was that Joker didn't die at the end of it. He was just in Arkham. He was put into prison. And the part that kind of surprises me of the audience's reaction to the ending, that is like, oh my God, this isn't actually the real Joker. This was, setting up another Joker that doesn't blah, blah, blah. And I was like, well, that's what the end of the first movie was. Even the director said at the end of the first movie that this was not the Joker. Like, this is not the Joker that's going to fend off Batman. This is like, almost in a way, this is Joker's origin through Arthur Fleck, because Arthur Fleck is never the Joker. He is a version of the Joker that will eventually lead to another Joker to then be the Joker who is the one that's, fighting against Batman. So like,
it's a joke of a Joker.
It's a joke of a Joker, exactly. It's the origin of the idea of Joker that leads into the origin of Joker that we will never see. And so the fact that people were upset by this is like, for me, the thing that I was kind of annoyed about was like, this is the same ending as the first one. Like, the idea of the Joker, not an actual Joker. But the only difference was, instead of him going to Arkham, he's dead. But also, I kind of laughed at this ending in a way, because this was like, the way that I also saw it was Todd Phillips being like, all right, I'm no more. I killed off this character. We can not do this again because he is dead. Because that was another way I took it, because I know a couple of things of behind the scenes. Ernesto, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say the same thing, that it's just the same themes as the first one. I also think that there's an element that's carried over from both films where that Arthur never got to decide who he was. Like, society pretty much, like he did one thing that gave him some sort of notoriety, and then that led him down this path where everybody kind of decided who he was. He never decided he was going to be the Joker. He became the Joker, and then infamously, reacted to Murray, and then that's what led to the events of the second one, and where he denounced the Joker, and they said, well, we're still gonna replace you. So then they killed him. He never really lived his own life.
I mean, that's actually a really good point that you brought up, because even in the first movie, he was talking about how he was never seen. He was always in the background, and now when he's finally seen, it goes into this extreme proportion that eventually and ultimately leads to his death, because he was seen, rather than he could have lived a separate life, maybe still living with his mother, not having much quote unquote purpose in his life, because he was also being, messed around when he was being, a street clown for stuff. So like, yeah, that's one way of looking at it as well. That kind of fame in a way got to him and was influenced by him, and then eventually led to his demise, because people thought of a version that he never was. He was, as he approached in court, he was always Arthur. There is no Joker, and people could not like fathom with the idea that he can be nothing but the Joker.
Right.
That's one way.
Their delusion sort of made the Joker, right?
Yes.
Well, there's always that. Like you like, I present myself to you one way, and I have an idea of how you see me, but how you guys actually perceive me is completely different. So
absolutely.
Right.
And Matt, you said, I thought it was interesting. You said that you felt like it was the director's almost middle finger, like, well, now this character's dead.
Yes.
And I took it completely opposite, as this character lives forever because it's not Arthur. It's not a person.
Right.
That's what I was getting at before about the idea that like the Joker is just an idea. So even if this guy dies, someone else will take his place, and the delusion continues on.
Right. Okay. So
that's what I took from it. But
so there is some reason, I guess. There's some context, I guess, when I say that.
Okay.
On the fact that. Yeah. So by saying that, so let's rewind a little bit. the end of the first Joker movie, Todd Phillips had a dream and a message, and like he there was a purpose behind what he wanted to say about the Joker character, right? The movie went on to make $1 billion, and it won 2 Academy Awards, and everyone was happy. Nominations, correct, right? And then Warner Brothers was like, "Hey, let's do this again," and Todd Phillips was like, "No," because everything I wanted to say with this movie was already said. And then Warner Brothers was like, "We give you all this money." Okay. And then they're like, "Okay, I guess I can find something." So, by saying that there was a version of this where, yes, theoretically, Todd Phillips was kind of giving the middle finger to the studio because they were kind of, in a way, not really forcing his hand, but they were giving him an opportunity to, like, there was also part of it that there was no pushback from the studio. He had full creative control of what he wanted to put into this movie, which could be another oversight on the studio for putting that much trust into him. But at the same time, you don't blame the studio for doing that, because the first movie made $1 billion, as well as the Hangover trilogy probably collectively was probably close to $1 billion, if not over $1 billion, and those are also all Warner Brothers properties. So, in the studio sense, they had no reason but to trust his vision, because he makes billions for us. So that could have been an oversight for the studio. And the fact that this was a movie that he did not necessarily want to make. I know Joaquin Phoenix was not particularly wanted to come back for this movie, but they offered him a whole bunch of money, and then they needed a whole bunch of money to secure Lady Gaga in the role when they had their vision set in place. A lot of people think that I think I was reading some of the ideas of why this movie quote unquote failed, and one of them was, well, that's because it was the idea of this movie was a dream that either the director or Joaquin Phoenix had, that the kind of led into, like, we're just going to expand on this dream, and there wasn't really that much thought put into it. And I don't 100% agree with that theory. Sure, an idea could have came from a dream, but that doesn't mean just because it came from a dream, the story's garbage. You know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of I said the idea came to Joaquin Phoenix in a dream, and I'm sure there are a lot of dreams out there that came into great stories. I don't think a dream would be the falter of that. No. And so, and then as I was saying before, I'm kind of reading this kind of breakdown of some of the details that could have led to the disaster. Todd Phillips had free reign with Warner Brothers wanting him to do his thing, and the film. The other thing, the film had no test screening. So there was no people watch the movie beforehand to kind of give notes to maybe shift the movie a little bit. I guess that was part of the contract. It's like, this is my movie through and through. I don't want no influences from anybody, which I found it quite interesting. Also, it's good to note, at least for the nerds out there, that James Gunn had zero influence on this film and was actually told not to even touch this film. James Gunn is now the co-CEO of DC Studios, which he's on his own line of films and has nothing to do with this little pocket of the Joker films. And so as far as like Todd Phillips looking to James Gunn for any input, he didn't want it. This was his movie through.
Whereas conversely, like the Penguin series, which was created, it's another Batman universe. It's like not part of James Gunn. That is included under DC Studios. These are the two properties that carried over from when DC Studios like changed over and they included James Gunn. So I thought that was also interesting.
Yes, and also another reason why they, part of the downfall for this movie was, and I think this part I kind of agree with, that the musical aspect was largely downplayed in the marketing. Like, if you go back and look at the trailers, I don't think people realized that probably a good majority of this movie was going to be music based. And then people were actually surprised when they went to go watch this movie. That's like, why is everyone singing? Where I knew going in, I know Ernesto and I, we talked about this in the podcast, is this was supposed to be a jukebox musical. We knew that for years. But I guess some people who are not in tune as what's the latest that's happening in movies were kind of taken aback and were expecting the same level as the first Joker movie, and then all of a sudden they were treated to this musical, which they probably weren't expecting. And then I saw some people who kind of made fun of the fact, like, Lady Gaga's in it. How can you not think it's a musical? Which I thought was kind of funny.
That's kind of my thought.
Like, did you know it was a lot of musical elements to it before going into it, Matt?
I did, yeah, I did, and I but maybe because I knew Lady Gaga was going to be in it, and having read about it, knew that it was going to be a musical.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, I did go into it knowing that music was involved, and again, that part for me I liked, and I wouldn't have, aside from maybe cutting that down a little bit, but cutting down the movie on the whole, I wouldn't have changed that at all. And I don't think it would have been a better movie had there been less music, because again, it just all played into the delusion.
Right.
The whole point.
It's also noted that apparently that Todd Phillips had contemplated on making a musical for his next picture anyway. So the fact that he was having full creative control and Warner Brothers was pushing the Joker to have a sequel, then he, I guess in connection with Joaquin's dream, that they were deciding to be like, okay, well, I want to make a musical anyway, and they're pushing for a Joker, so if they're giving me all this money, then let's just put two and two together, and now we have a Joker musical. So apparently, I think those are some contributing factors that some people believe that it was a downfall of this movie. As we typically do, Ernesto, let's talk about the box office. This movie is a disaster, to say the least. Let's start off with the film's critical and audience score. On Rotten Tomatoes, it both receives a 32% collectively, which is rare for, again, the critics and the audience to agree on the score of this movie. The Cinema Score, which is another rating system that people go to, gave this a D rating, meaning which was the lowest rating ever for a comic book movie. So the fact that it was given probably one of its, I think the lowest you can.
I think it's unfair. I think it's unfair to call this movie a comic book movie. First of all, I agree. I hear what you're saying, but fair. Like when they refer to it as a comic book movie, like there's certain elements that are inspired, that certain characters were inspired by comic book characters, but in no way, shape, or form is this a comic book movie.
That's a good point.
Yeah, and I guess the comic book is used loosely because it's
it's inspired. It's inspired. The characters are inspired by characters from the DC universe. Right. So I get it.
Yeah. The budget of the film was around $200 million, anywhere between $190 and $200 million. According to sources, $50 million of that was reportedly to secure Joaquin Phoenix, director Todd Phillips, and to bring on Lady Gaga. So that means that almost the budget of the first movie was to just secure talent to come onto this film. In order for the film to make a profit, the film needed to make $450 million. The film opened at number one with around $37.8 million, which is atrocious when your budget is $200 million. Mm-hmm. Not good. Opened around 37.8 domestically and $121 million worldwide. In its second week, it had a deep 81% decline in its second weekend. Then it going to number three, losing to another indie film that stars a clown called Terrifier 3. And in its third weekend, it fell to number 6. And at the time of the recording, we are now sitting at $57.8 million domestically, $143.3 million internationally, with a grand total of $201.1 million worldwide over the course of roughly about 3 weeks worth of its theatrical release. Or now we're entering its fourth week. Entering its fourth week. So, and the fact that this movie has just maybe broke even on just its budget, but it needs to make 250 to make a profit. It needs to make 450 to make a profit. We're not even close. So reports say that Warner Brothers is probably going to lose about $150 million on this movie. And like you said before, it's on track to hit video on demand later this week. By comparison, the first Joker movie generated $96.2 million domestically and $248 million globally after the first 3 days of its release, and earned over $1 billion worldwide during its theatrical run. So the film this movie never reached the opening numbers of the original film. And so the entire theatrical release of Joker never reached the opening weekend of Joker Yeah, Joker 2 never reached.
Yeah,
we gotcha.
You get it.
Got what you were putting down.
Yeah, not good all the way around. Matt, kind of again going back to, you know, do you see where we got a downfall? Do you like all this information just being thrown out there? Do you see where we can get to this point, or do you think that none of this, like, do you see in a world where this could have been successful, or do you kind of see how we got to these not people liking this movie, kind of the downfall of this sequel?
Knowing though that the first movie did so well, I don't know how you could repeat it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's so rare that a movie that does well is gonna ever live up to the first,
right?
Right. So I don't know. I think even grading on a curve, that's really hard. And I think because people went in with such high expectations, that's probably why the reaction is so the opposite.
Right.
So no, I think that's probably the worst factor, because I mean, even if we're looking back on our own commentary, the stuff we don't like about the movie is kind of nitpicky. I know for me, just watching it, I thought, again, some of the writing was just a little bit too literal, maybe. You know, like when the psychiatrist asked him if is it something from your childhood, Arthur? And I was just like, do we need to be so literal? You know what I mean? Is that really going to be the psychiatrist's like second question? So, but again, like kind of nitpicky. And then, yeah, so I don't know. I just think it was never going to live up to the $1 billion first movie. And maybe you're right. Maybe that was kind of like the sort of middle finger. Like, it doesn't matter because it's not going to be like the first.
Are you saying that the people who with high expectations were having their own delusion of the fact that this movie is going to live up to the first movie?
Yeah, or that the whole idea is that delusion is what built it. You know, like everybody's delusion is it's almost like an extended metaphor of the whole purpose for there being this second movie is the delusion of society, so to speak. That you want it so bad, fine, here it is. But
it's meta. I like it.
I'm here for it.
Yeah,
I like this. Ernesto, what about you? Do you see where we got to this downfall? Do you think it's just being overreacting to a bunch of different things? Do you think expectations have
I think it's largely
the
expectation. People looked at the first one and said, oh, wow, look at this, was able to give us so much. This was so good. This, this Oscar-winning movie, it made so much money. So you're already walking in thinking it's going to be, if it's not going to be the same thing, it's going to be close to what it was. And I just don't think that that's what this movie was at all. But once again, same. Like, my criticisms are more nitpicky. Like, I still feel like there are a lot of things that can be appreciated for what Todd Phillips was trying to put down in this movie.
Absolutely. So with that, all of those things said, Matt, we'll start with you. Your final thoughts on the movie, and something new that since you've been on the last 3 years, we operate off of a 5-star rating system, and we do half stars as well. So, kind of your final thoughts as well as your 5-star rating on the movie.
I think even just this conversation improves my opinion of the movie, but I still think it was overlong, and that, like, I just, as a former news reporter, I wish I could get into the edit bay and like chop things out.
Get your red marker
and tell the story in a more concise way. And then I think it would have been a stronger movie. So I think I'm going to go in the middle and give it a 2.5, which is, I'm sticking with it. 2.5.
Yeah. Okay. What about you?
Kind of same. I feel like there's a lot to appreciate. We talk about the sensationalism. We talk about the whole idea of being infamous and being famous, and how everybody shared delusions in their attachment to Arthur as the Joker, and how that plays out. This guy who replaces him, like the whole setup, him watching him and him killing him at the end to take his place. Like I don't know. Like there were a lot of little things to appreciate. I mean, I love Lady Gaga. Her voice is amazing. Like I listen to some of the music. Like it was good. Like there are a lot of things that I really enjoyed, that I still really enjoyed about it. So I'm actually gonna go. I'm gonna go 3 stars. I was floating between 3 and 3.5. I think I'm gonna go 3.
You're floating with 3 and 3.5.
I love them. I love me some Lady Gaga music. Let me tell you, she's just so good. Her voice is so good.
I'm not sure if Lady Gaga's music will constitute for me to go 3.5 on it. But I guess the maths are sticking together, because I'm also going to be feeding into about a 2.5 on this one. Just around the 50% mark, because at the end of the day, like we've all been explaining and kind of talking about it, I do agree with Matt that as the course of this conversation, it has kind of deeping down on some of the elements of it thematically. Like they're saying something. This isn't necessarily of a waste of a movie. They're trying to say something. It was done in a very unorthodox and maybe even some could say boring way. But I think up until the court case, the first half of this movie had my interest. And then eventually with the overlong, musical numbers and maybe even to Matt's point, some of the things could have been chopped out. Like if this was an hour and 45 and we got to chop off at least a good, I don't know, was that 40 minutes from the movie? I think we could have had a more concise version of it. And then I don't feel like that we were drawn out to it. So, but there is something to be said about this movie, either the existence of it, the meta-ness around it, the theme that they're portraying in here. But like at the end of the day, this was still a well-made movie. Like there's nothing really... Yeah. I can't really nitpick on the acting. I can't nitpick on how it was shot. I can't nitpick on the directorial intent and the themes around it. I mean, the only thing, the most nitpicking that we've done so far is the script. That just didn't land with us, and maybe some of the inclusion in the musical numbers. But yeah, at the end of the day, I'm sitting at a 2.5 on it. It's right down the middle. I think it's some of this. It's like high expectations kind of definitely played into it on both maybe the studio's front and the audience front, of like people were expecting an Oscar-worthy film, and they did not deliver on that in their opinion. Also mine too, because I don't think this movie was worth Oscar attention. But yeah, right down the middle for me. And there you go. That's our spoiler review on Joker Folie Deux. Matt, thank you. After 3 years joining us and talking about the movie I did not expect that we were going to talk about, to be honest with you. I did not, that when we had you back on the show, this was not the movie I thought we had in mind.
Well, I just want to say thank you guys for having me. I think we can all agree on the scale. Lady Gaga gets 5.
Oh, I mean, without a doubt.
Absolutely.
For sure.
Absolutely, yes.
The Lady Gaga, if you're listening, I know she is.
She was waiting for your review.
You can do no wrong. We love you. And please get back to work, because I want to be on the pod.
I would like to think that Lady Gaga can, we can have you on other than Lady Gaga, but now I think it's the precedent that every Lady Gaga movie that comes about, we have to have you on the show. So I hope you started this, so I hope you know that.
Perfect. I'm down for it.
Going in, that if she's doing another movie, which I'm looking up right now, she does not have anything in the works at the moment. As far as a movie's concerned, she did A Star Is Born, she did House of Gucci, and then she did Joker Folie Deux. So, and then there was
we get it. She's got new songs coming out. It's okay.
So, but rest assured, if she ever does a film again, which she's probably going to, we're going to have Matt Lupoli on to discuss.
I will count on it, you guys.
We would love to have you back on. No,
great.
Of course.
Absolutely. If you want more from us, you can always follow us on our social media channels on Facebook, YouTube, and TikTok at Box Office Bingers, our X and Letterboxd page at Box Office Binger, and our Threads and Instagram page at _Bingers. The fun doesn't stop here. It continues on our social media channels. If you can follow one, that'd be great. If you can follow all, not complaining either. I'm not picky. Either one, all one, but one probably was fine too. Whichever is your social media of choice. And if you don't follow any social medias, then if you just subscribe to us on any of the place you listen to podcasts, and that's good too. We'll take that as well. Ernesto, tell them listen.
Next week we're going to be reviewing Jason Reitman's new film, Saturday Night. It's recapping the first Saturday night, the first taping or live taping of Saturday Night Live. I'm very interested in this film, especially since it's not done by ABC. And doesn't seem like NBC and Lorne Michaels is not attached to it, even though it's detailing a very pivotal moment in his life.
In a way, that's almost like a labor of love or respect for SNL in general, but yet none of the creators or people behind it wanted to be involved with it, at least that we know of. But I also look forward to what we typically do around these type of films, our fact and fictions.
What actually happened?
What was real? What's not. Exactly. Which we typically like to do in certain episodes like that. So be sure to come back next week to listen to our thoughts on Saturday Night. And also has early Oscar contention. Lately, it's kind of been on the fence of whether or not people are looking at it, but it's definitely one that people are looking into. So we'll see if it's worthy of any notoriety as we talk about the film next week. Matt, again, as always, it was a pleasure having you on. 3 years is way too long.
Hopefully we can get you on soon.
To have you on the pod. Yes.
I hope so, you guys.
If we can do a once a year thing, I'm okay with it.
Lock it in.
Perfect.
Let's start there. Lock it in.
Where do I sign?
Yeah, you go.
Somewhere. Well, I think that we'd like to thank each and every one of you for listening and watching us. Really do appreciate it. Come back next week for more movie fun. You're not going to regret it. For that, I've been your host,
Santos. See ya.